Thanks for tuning in to the Better Sports Network. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship over at myffpc.com. I am your host, Eric Balkman. Follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. You can also follow the FFPC on X at FFPC. We have a wonderful show for you tonight, a lot of rookie discussion. So if you come for the rookies tonight, you will be thrilled at everything we'll be talking about. We'll also get into some veteran stuff as well, because I think anytime we're talking Dynasty, we're always talking veterans, what to do, buy, sell, trade, cut, what have you. That is all going to happen on tonight's show. The show is brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Check out the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament and the Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball Tournament. $40,000 and $10,000 grand prizes, respectively. $125 and $35 entry fees. Those tournaments are running through April 24th, which is the first day of the NFL draft. Then they will slam down like an anvil. I don't know, something that slams down hard. 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clocks are available for those drafts, as well as the FFPC Big Gorilla Tournament, a $1 million grand prize, $350 entry fee. Drafts already running now, including the early Rampage portion of the tournament. If you're entering the Big Gorilla right now, you're automatically entered in the early Rampage tournament. It is 2 tournaments for the price of $1 million grand prize, $10,000 grand prize. And don't forget about the 7 Bananas promotion. If you continue to get that 7th pick, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 times in a row, you're going to get a free $125 best ball team, a free FFPC main event team, a free $10,000 high society entry. And if you get it 5 times in a row, boom, Jungle Safari for 4 is all yours. myffpc.com. Dynasty Orphans available there as well. myffpc.com is where to go. Entry fees have been reduced. They're normally between $77 and $5,000. Some are as little as $1 right now. Take advantage. Get a free team for 2025. 1,800 plus leagues over 15 years, and none have ever folded. myffpc.com is where to go for that. Want to shout out our producer, Matt Deutsch, and welcome in my co-host with the most tonight. You follow him. Now, Brendon, I want to make sure I get this right.
Yeah.
Big Boned FFP.
Yes.
Okay. I
Correct.
want to make sure I got the pronunciation right. Big Boned FFP from Player Profiler, the Fantasy Football Advice Network, FantasySportsAdvice.com. He is the incomparable Brendon Booth. Brendon, thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight. This is going to be fun. I sometimes I just get feelings like we're going to have a really good show. We always have really good shows, but sometimes I don't know how they're going to go. I just have a gut feeling this is going to be a fun ride tonight for 2 hours, my man.
Yeah, and I feel bad because I just got done in pre-pro with Matt telling him how good my equipment is and everything, and then I had a camera snafu right at the very beginning. But yeah, you all got to see my Jaxson Dart as Darth Vader avatar, so
which is great.
That was pretty cool.
And we will be talking Jaxson Dart tonight for sure when we get into the rookies. Can you, before we get into the actual analysis, can you kind of give us the lay of the land? Not necessarily how you got into the industry, but what you're doing in the industry right now.
So I am grinding hardcore right now. I'm on 3 major platforms, Player Profiler now, plus I'm on Fantasy Sports Advice Network, and I'm on the Undroppables. We have a Dynasty show that airs on Thursday nights on FSAN, we record it on Thursday nights on FSAN, and then it drops on the Undroppables and Fantasy Football Plus on YouTube the next day. So it's kind of a situation where we're premiering it on FSAN, and then the recording comes out, but it's elongated. So we cut it off and cut it in half, and then when it goes out on Undroppables and on FF Plus, it's actually there's an after party, an after show. It's pretty cool.
This is the After Dark portion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dynasty Pulse After Dark.
After Dark.
I have a Dynasty show on Player Profiler now on Tuesdays. I have a news show on Player Profiler now on Fridays. Undroppables, I'm the Raiders correspondent for our Uncovered series, which is all distinct content creators for each individual team. We do have a lot of teams available, so if anybody wants to get the hookup and do your own content creation for your favorite team, reach out to me at my Twitter handle, give me a DM, and we'll hook you up. You can do your own show. I just saw your Raiders necklace in the background, and now I'm chuffed. I'm absolutely stoked now.
So I have to explain this because people say this all the time. I am not a Raiders fan, but I am not a Raiders hater either.
Okay.
The Raiders thing comes from my Friday night show that I do with the KFFSC commissioner, Farrell Elliott, for the FFPC, not the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, which we're doing now, but the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Farrell is a big Raiders fan.
Okay.
And one of our longtime viewers of that show bought this illustrious Raiders necklace. And he said, this is a little way to kind of, I wouldn't say like perturb Farrell, but like anytime we talk Raiders, I take that chain off, I put it on. Maybe when we get into the Jaxson Dart, not Jaxson Dart, the Raheem Mostert portion of the program, maybe I'll don that. I don't know. I just don't know what's going to happen. Anything possible here. Let's get into it here. This is going to be fun, Brendon. I want to kick things off in the Pacific Northwest, where Newman from Seinfeld learned how to climb trees. Cooper Kupp has signed a 3-year, $45 million contract with the Seattle Seahawks to pair with Jaxson Smith-Njigba. I don't want to say the lazy analysis on this is that these guys are both slot guys and they are not complementary. It's a duplication of skills. I don't want to say lazy, but I think that was my immediate reaction to it. I've heard other people say this as well. Your thoughts on Kupp and Smith-Njigba, who is going fairly high in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball tournament right now. I think he's at like the 2-3 turn. What do you think Kupp's effect is going to be on Smith-Njigba's numbers? And bearing in mind that Ryan Grubb is no longer the pass-happy Ryan Grubb that was there last year, no longer there, apparently because Mike McDonald thought there was too much passing. I could see potential regression from Smith-Njigba just in general. I could see potential regression from Smith-Njigba because of Kupp, and I could see potential regression for Smith-Njigba because of no Ryan Grubb there anymore as well. I like Smith-Njigba. I think he's really, really talented. I loved what he did last year. But now that Kupp is in the fold, how do we handle Smith-Njigba? I'll let you talk about Kupp as well in his new digs in Seattle.
I think the first thing that we have to assume in the thought exercise is that Cooper Kupp stays healthy and plays 17 games. If that is the case, then obviously he's another mouth to feed in an offense that JSN, or as I like to call him, Kanan Smith-Njigba's brother.
Who is Kanan Smith? I saw this. Who is Smith-Njigba? I don't get that.
He's a minor league ball player for the formerly for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think he was with the Seattle Mariners for a little bit.
Are they really brothers? Are they brothers in real life?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah. I'm learning tonight. This is good
stuff. So 2 professional athletes as brothers. And I just came across it in a pack of Topps cards, Kanan Smith-Njigba, and I was like, oh, okay. So the first that you said lazy analysis. I agree with you. It's not necessarily lazy. It is the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, we have 2 slot receivers. Last year, Cooper Kupp had 57% of his routes run out of the slot. JSN was at 74%. That doesn't seem like they're compatible. Then you start talking about Clint Kubiak and the fact that he comes from the Shanahan route tree or Shanahan coaching tree. The Shanahan coaching tree likes to utilize receiving running backs, a tight end a lot. They like a do-it-all wide receiver similar to Deebo Samuel, that kind of thing. Kubiak had the New Orleans Saints cooking for the first couple games last year, and a lot of that was on the arm of Derek Carr. So if they are going to continue at a volume pace like that, I think you can feed both of those mouths. It doesn't look like Lockett is going to be returning to Seattle. So I look at it as JSN being the primary receiver. They did give a vote of confidence to Cooper Kupp with that contract. To sign a guy his age with his injury history to a 3-year deal is kind of wild to me anyway. But even though Smith-Njigba ran 74% of his routes out of the slot last year, it doesn't mean that they don't have in mind maybe making him a full-time Y guy, running motion stuff, maybe lining up on the outside. We don't know, but we have to assume that that's the case. If that's the case, Cooper Kupp probably won't have much of an effect on JSN, and I am here to catch him when he falls because I want that value suppressed. He absolutely broke out. We knew it was coming. Going into the 2023 season, we kind of knew where the top 3 rookies were going to shake out. We knew that Addison was going to get more of an opportunity at the beginning, but JSN was probably a superior wide receiver, and Quentin Johnston was kind of an afterthought. And that kind of is exactly the way that it played out. In 2024, JSN has this huge monster year, and I don't think that Cooper Kupp is going to do much to kill that. So let that value be suppressed and take advantage.
Kupp right now, speaking of the value, wide receiver 46, Brendon, 9-11 is where he's going in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. Shout out to Fantasy Mojo and Darren Armani at Fantasy Mojo on the X, fantasymojo.com. Anytime I cite ADP on this program, it is all due to what he's doing there. Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 46, Luther Burden and Emeka Egbuka right in front of him, Matthew Golden and Jalen McMillan right behind him. Cooper Kupp at the 9-11. Where do you think he ends up? Now, I'll just say this. Let's take this Never Too Early tournament as the rubric here. We know that this shuts down April 24th, so you got about a month of drafting left. How high does Kupp go up? If he's at the back end of the 9th round, well, I shouldn't say how high is he going to go up, Brendon. I should ask you this. How high is too high for Kupp? Like, when does he cease becoming a value? Because to me, I'm with you right now at the end of the 9th. That's still a value for Kupp.
Right. And I mean, Kupp has the opportunity to absolutely outplay his ADP as it stands now if he can put together a full season. The problem is he hasn't done that since 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something that you're going to invest in? I don't think so. Is that something that you're going to look at those guys coming right behind him, especially Egbuka, who profiles as a wide receiver 1, and Jalen McMillan, who did take a hit in free agency with the re-signing of Chris Godwin, but broke out similar to how we kind of expected last year? Are you going to make the investment in Kupp over those guys who potentially would stay healthy and have more opportunity? And I don't think so. I think he's at a really, really great spot now, because if you're grabbing him in the 40s, he has the opportunity to play into a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 with a 17-game season. But are you going to take that chance is really the question. And I don't think I would. I
think as much as we'd loved Cooper Kupp over the past several years, a guy we've probably loved even more so, who is also probably has his best football behind him. I'm not saying he doesn't have good football in front of him, but it's Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is a guy that I don't think it was in 2024. I think it was 2023. Some people were taking him as the number 1 overall player in some FFPC drafts. He had surgery last month, I want to say, because of that wrist injury, that wrist problem that he had, which kind of dogged him throughout the whole season. He had this brief kind of like, I want out of here moment on social media. It seems like they have figured it out and that he's going to be okay. Wrist injury, Tua Tagovailoa going down. And then we saw a huge concentration on Mike McDaniel's offense going to Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane in the passing game rather than Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Was that because the Dolphins line couldn't block long enough for Hill and Waddle to get open? I think that's a fair assessment. I don't know what it is. But Tyreek Hill did not do what a lot of people were hoping for last year, Brendon. And if I look at his ADP, it's kind of reflected in that. He's fallen to wide receiver 13. He's the guy going right after JSN right now at the 303. Does that sound like a good spot that you want to be in business with? How likely is a comeback or a bounce back year for Tyreek Hill in 2025?
I think a comeback is very, very likely. Again, just there are some things that we have to wish cast, like Tua staying healthy. But one of the things that I like to look at is a regression, a positive regression to previous efficiency. And his efficiency rates were down last year from his career norms, which means that if he's healthy and his quarterback is healthy, he's going to return to his career levels of efficiency. So that's why they have comeback player of the year candidates and things like that. You have guys who they take a dip and then they tend to bounce back. Now, again, the chances of that happening at 32 years old or 31 years old are a little bit different than when you're 27. But I think the way that Tyreek Hill plays, I mean, let's not forget 2023, he was trying to get to 2,000 yards and he came pretty darn close. Mm-hmm. So even a small step back from that, he's still in that top 24 range. I have no problem taking him in the 3rd round. I have zero problem taking him in the 4th round and expecting him to be a wide receiver 2 candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're getting Hill as a wide receiver 2 this year, he's among the higher end wide receiver 2s, and it makes perfect sense that you would be able to form a potential juggernaut there. I mean, you think about just looking at how this lays out right now. If Hill is going in the early 3rd, that means that you could start off your draft with, if you wanted to, I mean, if you want to go crazy, you could go Jamar Chase, Ladd McConkey, Tyreek Hill to start off your draft. And I say crazy like wide receiver crazy. I'm not saying that's crazy. I'd love that start if I was
or JSN instead of McConkey.
Or JSN, or you could skip Chase if you want to get your hero running back, you could get Barkley or Bijan Robinson or even Jahmyr Gibbs up at the top as well. So I think Tyreek Hill as your third player off the board, I think you're doing it right. I'm going to ask you about Garrett Wilson. I've heard a lot of differing opinions on him going into this season. In fact, I think the Podfather was just talking about this the other day about how Justin Fields may or may not be the best quarterback that Garrett Wilson's ever had. I mean, he struggled through his first few years there. He gets Aaron Rodgers last year, but the connection was just never there. We saw the frustration with Wilson. And then obviously when Adams was there, Wilson took a clear back seat for the most part for the remainder of the season. Garrett Wilson right now is, we're going right down the line. JSN, Tyreek Hill, and Garrett Wilson's wide receiver 14. He is a mid-third round pick right in front of Higgins and McLaurin right now. Tell us why. Okay, now tell us why that is such an appetizing ADP for Wilson right now.
So what you just did was you hammered his 2024 season with all of the problems that he had to deal with, and he finished wide receiver 10 in scoring.
Yes.
Okay, now we have to take a look at Justin Fields. Justin Fields, when he was with Chicago, was one of the least efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. In fact, according to the Football Outsiders RIP, they're in their DVOA for quarterbacks, he was ranked 34th. That meant that he was ranked below a lot of the backup quarterbacks, and he was even behind Zach Wilson. So even if Fields goes there, it doesn't mean that he's the best quarterback now that Garrett Wilson has played with, because he was worse than Zach Wilson. But there is something to look at in Chicago when Fields was there from 2021 to 2023, and that's DJ Moore. DJ Moore had 2 seasons with more fantasy points per game when he had Fields at quarterback than he did last year with Caleb Williams. He had 163 targets as a rookie and only 4 fewer targets in 2023 than he had last year. And 2023 was the best season of his career. He finished as wide receiver 6. I'm not scared of Wilson with Fields, because even as bad as Fields is, he has shown that he can support a top 10 wide receiver, which Garrett Wilson was in a terrible situation last year. And if the Jets are building their team and Fields comes in and he's even the slightest bit improved from what he did in 2023, I think Garrett Wilson is going to be fine. 150, 160 targets is probably, where he's going to sit for your projections. Right now, I was looking at some other redraft stuff. He's going as wide receiver 16. I love wide receiver 16 for him, because that's another guy where you're drafting him as your wide receiver 2, and he has the upside to be a wide receiver 1, and that's an absolute value. So I'm huge on Garrett Wilson.
I don't want to. I like playing would you rather's. Like, would you rather have this guy? Would you rather have this guy? I think I have to shift this, because a lot of times when I do the would you rather, you don't have to decide between 2 of these players, because if you like a certain guy like Garrett Wilson, and if you think he's going to finish better than a certain receiver, you can still get both of those guys. So let me throw it to you this way. Yeah. Who finishes with more fantasy points in 2025? Garrett Wilson or Tyreek Hill?
Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson or Jaxson Smith-Njigba?
Jaxson Smith-Njigba.
Garrett Wilson or Ladd McConkey?
Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson or Drake London?
Drake London.
Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown?
Garrett Wilson. Now, I do want to say...
Hold on. Let me just do one more, because I thought you were going to go the other way on that one. Let me just do one more. Garrett Wilson or Brian Thomas?
Oh, that's a great one. I'm going to say Brian Thomas Jr. Now, let me what's the opposite of... Let me postface what I just said with 2 things, 2 caveats. Number 1, that was a lightning round. And number 2, we're not in the business of what will happen. We're in the business of what is most likely to happen.
Probabilities,
And,
absolutely, yes.
So that was kind of the calculations were going on in my brain. The little hamster was running overtime. He's toweling off right now. But yeah, I mean, I am absolutely higher on Garrett Wilson than consensus at this point. I think that's going to, once this free agency chaos kind of dies down and we get into training camps, I think those drafts are going to reflect more the true value of where Garrett Wilson stands. I think he's going to just rise the whole summer.
There is a player that people were hoping that would rise for them after they soaked a second-round pick in redraft into him, and probably the 101 in dynasty leagues last year, and he never rose. At least I don't think he rose to. I don't know anybody who drafted Marvin Harrison last year. Brendon was saying, "Yeah, I'm really glad I did that."
Nope.
The dynasty aspect, though, when you consider so much people who maybe tanked for the 101 and got Harrison, and now maybe have the endowment effect where they believe that he is worth more than than he actually is. So you may not be able to swing a deal. You may get people who drafted him at the 101 in Dynasty last year who believe that they would be selling him for 50 cents on the dollar right now. Like that would be the going rate because nobody's going to give them what they believe is fair market value. You have to consider that as well. But Harrison has fallen. Redraft leagues, he is going as wide receiver 17 right now in the FFPC. How likely would it be for you to call Marvin Harrison a dynasty buy, a guy that you need to go out and try to get right now, considering that he let a lot of us down last year, and we don't know if that's going to turn around.
He didn't let a lot of us down, or he didn't let everyone down.
Okay,
yeah. So I had a model, and you can find it on if you just type in 1D/RR in the Twitter search, and it should be the third tweet down. And I hit and I missed on Malachi Corley. Forgive me. It was purely analytics based. But that model, that aggregation of analytics showed that Malik Neighbors was the best wide receiver in the class. Ladd McConkey was number 2, and Marvin Harrison Jr. was number 6. So I was loaded. I was absolutely over my skis with Malik Neighbors and Ladd McConkey shares last year. And I think I might have had Marvin Harrison Jr. on maybe 1 or 2 teams. He did go 101 in my Dynasty Home League draft, where I sat 102 and immediately took Malik Neighbors very happily. And it's not that I saw it coming. It's just that I had indicators that other people were going to outproduce him. And then he landed in Arizona. Looking at his catch rates with Kyler Murray as his quarterback is very, very scary. He's in the 50% range of catchable balls. Meanwhile, Trey McBride is in the 70%. What that indicates to me is that Kyler Murray has trouble getting the ball down the field, but he's perfectly fine in short area passing situations. That might be reflective of his height. If that's the case, Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably not going to spike until sometime when Kyler Murray is no longer his quarterback. So I'm not in a position right now where I'm interested in buying Marvin Harrison. What I'm waiting for is for him to start off 2025 with a similar dip in production to what he did in 2024 and go then mid-season. Grab him then because his value will be even lower. And I can't think of many people who would be primed for a bigger third-year breakout than Marvin Harrison Jr. We love the Brian Hartline OSU wide receiver school. Jaxson Smith-Njigba we already talked about. We talked about Garrett Wilson. We haven't talked about Chris Olave, but that certainly could be a conversation. Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka coming out, it's just a rich pool of wide receiver talent. Brian Hartline knows what he's doing, and he knows what to do with the kids that he recruits. Marvin is one of those guys, and he's got the bloodline, and that's why everybody was so excited about him. He just landed in a disastrous situation for his fantasy production, and I don't like him into the top 12 at any point until Kyler Murray's not his quarterback.
This, to me, from what you're saying here, this sounds like a Murray problem. This is not a Harrison problem.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's get Joe Flacco to Arizona stat, and we'll get Kyler Murray could go to your Raiders. How would you feel about that?
Shout out to Chev. I just got bricked up in the concrete aisle.
Devontae Adams. I don't know how I transition. Devontae Adams is now a Los Angeles Ram. Very excited about this from fantasy for fantasy purposes. The fact that Matthew Stafford is going to be the quarterback, the fact that you still have Puka Nacua there. We know how much the Sean McVay offense is continue to target receivers as a change of pace from targeting receivers. That's basically all they do is they target receivers in that offense. Adams is probably going to be the number 2 there. Are you worried about the age? Where do you think he finishes among receivers this year? And I'll tell you this right now, and I know we don't like to speak in absolutes, but Devontae Adams right now in the Never Too Early FFPC Best Ball Tournament is going as wide receiver 20 at the 409. This is Xavier worthy Mike Evans territory. How do you feel about Adams? Not from a dynasty standpoint necessarily,
sure,
Brendon, but from just for a 2025 solely 2025 standpoint.
I love that ADP at 20. I feel like his chances of finishing within the top 12 in LA are absolutely huge. I could see him and Kupp being absolute monsters. If we get Matthew Stafford back to a 450 to 500 attempt season, both of those guys are going to be the beneficiaries of that. Devontae Adams had a great year last year, despite the fact that he only played 14 games. He may be slowing down a little bit. He had a pretty bad concussion in 2023 with the Raiders. You saw him with some shoulder problems in that Netflix special. He had an injury issue last year with the Raiders before they traded him away. So he was down in games, but his fantasy points per game still sustained at what he does in his career. I feel like I'm very comfortable with him having one more season in the top 12. We know that's the type of receiver he is. If he can stay in the 130 to 140 target range, I think he's definitely going to exceed the ADP of 20.
So for you, as far as like the age aspect, you did not see enough of a drop off that would say, hey, exercise caution when drafting him there.
No, because it's a different situation to Tyreek Hill. I come from baseball analytics first and kind of fell into football. But one of the things about baseball players is that the first thing to go is speed. As you get older, speed goes. So if you rely on speed as your ceiling for talent, and that starts to go, that's going to hurt. Devontae Adams has never been a burner. Mm-hmm. He's a guy who he is extremely efficient with his route running.
Tactician. He's a total tactician. Yeah,
exactly. So he's going to sustain. Look at Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice played into his 40s, and he was still effective the entire way there. Because Jerry Rice wasn't even as fast as Brendan Rice, he just learned how to run routes, how to beat cornerbacks with his brain. Devontae Adams is a similar player. He had a late breakout because he wasn't utilized because he didn't have that speed as a cachet. And once people got wise to his ability to come back to the quarterback on scramble plays and absolutely destroy defensive backs, even in double team situations with his route running abilities, he took off and became one of the best receivers in fantasy that we had for a good 5 or 6 year stretch. So I think he still has the ability to do that as long as he's healthy, he stays on the field. And I don't see a huge drop off this year.
Just real quick, and we're living in the matrix with this question on YouTube from R. Shafe, but I'll ask it anyway. Would Marvin Harrison Jr. have thrived as a Giant? In other words, without Kyler Murray there, if he would have gone to the Giants instead of the Cardinals, and maybe Malik Neighbors goes to the Cardinals instead, would that have changed his 2024 drastically?
I think it would have, but I don't think it would have changed as much as like it wouldn't have made him Malik Neighbors. They do two different things on the football field. Malik benefits from the fact that he can get open anywhere, and Marvin's route tree is a little bit more conservative than Malik Neighbors. But I think that better quarterback play with somebody who had the ability to get the ball down the field to him. I think that would have changed a lot.
Continuing our wide receiver discussion, the other big domino to fall was DK Metcalf going to Pittsburgh, Brendon. It was an exchange for a 2025 second-round pick, 5 years, $150 million contract. So now the Steelers have Pickens, they have Metcalf, and they have, I don't know, at quarterback. And I don't think the Steelers know what they're going to have at quarterback. I phrased this question wrong on the show sheet because I don't like it when people ask me this question. Can DK Metcalf succeed in Pittsburgh? Yes, he obviously can. The question should be, Brendon, will DK Metcalf succeed in Pittsburgh? And I guess we got to find out who the quarterback is right now. If you're drafting in the Never Too Early tournament, or if you're making dynasty trades right now, that you don't have the luxury of knowing who the quarterback is going to be. Metcalf, wide receiver 25. He's going in the mid-5th round right now. What's your outlook on him going from Seattle to Pittsburgh?
I think so. Okay. So number one, the quarterback situation, it looks like it's either going to be Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or Shedeur Sanders. Those seem to be like the three options.
Okay. Now let me stop you there. Yeah. If those are the three options, I mean, aren't all of those pretty solid? And then Metcalf is being undervalued because of the uncertainty there. Like people, I think would be letting him slip a little bit right now because, well, yeah, it could be those guys, but what if it's somebody else, right?
Right. So yeah, the question, can he succeed? Yes. Looking at Drake London in 2023, he was PPR wide receiver 37. He had 110 targets. That was in the Arthur Smith offense. I would not be very surprised if DK Metcalf kind of repeats that, which puts him with his depth of target in the 25 to 30 range. I think he's going to have to exceed that target potential. Will Arthur Smith do that? Did George Pickens get that last year? The thing that's baffling, so I went and I started looking at their route trees, and DK's primary 3 routes are 9, slant, and dig. Pickens, 9, slant, and curl. So basically, they're both lining up in the same spot. They're running the same things. They're either going to go all the way down the field on a go route, or they're going to slant across the middle, or one's going to come back, the other's going to cut across. Not real diversity there. And I don't know how you do that with 2 guys running the same thing. Does that mean that George Pickens is going to be traded away? Is he a trade candidate? I feel like the big thing last year was his attitude, and I think that soured him to the organization, and that's why they invested so highly in DK Metcalf. When you have 2 guys who are they're basically the same player on the field, and there's a heavy investment in one over the other, you have to lean towards that other guy. So I think no matter what happens next year, DK Metcalf is the wide receiver 1 in that offense, and George Pickens might be an afterthought, might not be targeted as aggressively, might be, traded away from Pittsburgh. I think DK isn't the one that got hurt in that situation. It was Pickens that got absolutely torpedoed.
And I think that, well, here's the thing. In regards to Metcalf and Pickens, I don't know if the letting go of Najee Harris to free agency where he signs with the Chargers and they're just rolling with Jalen Warren. I don't know if we read too much into that where we say, okay, maybe they're going to throw more this year. That just doesn't strike me as a Steelers type of thing to do. But certainly that's again, it's in the range of outcomes, which we are in the business with. We're trying to figure out, the range of outcomes for all these guys. And right now it's fairly wide with Metcalf. Maybe we wish it was wider with Pickens, but it may not be. Jerry Jeudy set the Browns single season reception record last year, 90 for 1,229 yards, 4 touchdowns. He is the man in that Browns passing offense. But who is the quarterback? Same question we're asking with DK Metcalf, right? We don't know. I mean, it's probably not Deshaun Watson. Kenny Pickett views himself as a starter. That's adorable, Kenny. But I think the other thing that we have to allow for is maybe Russell Wilson goes to Cleveland. Maybe Aaron Rodgers goes to Cleveland. Like maybe they take one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the draft or top 3 quarterbacks in the draft, and that's the guy here. What's the proper way to handle Jerry Jeudy in dynasty leagues? Do we turn a blind eye to the quarterback and bet on the talent, knowing that this guy showed what he can do last year? It's not like his quarterbacks were awesome last year. He didn't have Pro Bowlers throwing to him. So how would you, if you had Jerry Jeudy in a dynasty league right now, or maybe if you didn't, would you be looking to acquire him? Would you be fishing around to see, maybe this is a distressed asset right now that I can pick up? Or would you take the other side of the argument and say, like, I don't know who this guy's quarterback is. I don't know if the Browns are going to be any good. This could be a total dumpster fire of an offense. I don't want to have anything to do with. I mean, Jerry Jeudy, nobody talks about, I should say nobody, but not a lot of people talk about him being a polarizing dynasty player, but I think he's in that conversation.
Yeah, I have him as a sell right now. And the reason, I mean, the quarterback situation is huge, but also Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman was the wide receiver one, even with Jeudy on the field before he got hurt last year. And that, I mean, that scares me. And David Njoku had a pretty big year too. So it's not like the Browns are totally out of options in the receiving game. I like Tillman to continue to progress and get better and become more of a focal point in that offense. And I think that it's a similar situation to Detroit. I love Jahmyr Gibbs, but what did he do before David Montgomery got hurt? And what did he do after? When the team is in their balanced state, it does suppress the production of those guys. So I unless Jerry Jeudy has, wide receiver one written all over him, which he hasn't really had since the draft he was in.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he doesn't repeat what he did last year. So I would be selling at this value.
I mean, looking at Occam's razor here, the Occam's razor is not valid, but I would say something like, what would I be more surprised at in 2025? I would be more surprised if he came close or duplicating what he did in 2024. I would not be surprised at all if he took a step back and did not show the efficiency that he showed this past season. That to me is less surprising, which is probably why I'm with you on this. If I have him, I'm shopping him around, and I'm certainly not trying to take him on in a trade at this point.
You always kind of have to look at, especially when you have a big enough sample size, you kind of have to look at where's the outlier. Mm-hmm. And if you have a bunch of mid seasons and then a huge spike season because the wide receiver one got hurt, that seems to me like it feels like the outlier.
I want to go back to a Davante Adams question from our man Dynasty D. Dustin wants to know, Davante Adams, this isn't a Dynasty rookie draft. Would you go Davante Adams or would you go the 201?
Thanks for checking in, Dustin. Dustin, part of the Dynasty D-Gens and one of my fellow player profiler guys.
Is he a mock draft rival with you? That's the true question here.
He has, but the last two that I was in, he sniped Brock Bowers from me. I thought getting in at the 110 in the mock draft would be like fair value for Brock Bowers, and he took him at the 9. So the next one I was in, I went even earlier, grabbed the 8 spot, and Brock Bowers went at 106. So I just have to keep moving up. I would rather have Davante Adams.
Obviously in a vacuum, but if you're looking to rebuild, or if you need the draft capital, you are parting with Davante Adams for the 201, right?
Yes, correct. Okay. I'm giving up.
But that's the only scenario.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm describing this horribly. I'm saying if you are trying to rebuild, you would rather have that. You would give up Davante Adams to acquire the 201 for this.
Correct.
Year, right? Okay, but that's the only scenario in which you do it.
Right. I feel like Davante so I tend to play Dynasty with a win now approach. And so I'm looking at what's the potential for next year's production. And then I will deal with the player values down the line.
Okay.
It's not always successful. I get stuck with a lot of players that I had high hopes for. But I feel like going into 2025, Davante Adams is going to outplay whoever you get in your rookie draft at the 201. Now, if it was in a startup draft, 201, I feel like that's a little bit high.
Yeah, no, it's the 201. You would take the 201 totally in a startup.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in the rookie draft, I'm at the 201. I am out of wide receivers and into running backs, and probably out of running backs that will start right away. So I would still rather have Davante Adams.
Let's move on and talk about another receiver who has probably seen his best football already on the field and is trying to hang on and still be relevant. He's wide receiver 38 in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament at the 802, behind Jawan Jennings and Khalil Shakir, right ahead of Brandon Ayuk and Jaden Reed. His name is Deebo Samuel, and he's on the Commanders this year, Brendon. How does this guy turn in a great season? Maybe he can't turn into a great season. Quite frankly, if he turns in a good season, wide receiver 38 seems pretty good. Knowing the type of player he is and knowing the type of offense Cliff Kingsbury runs and knowing what the wide receiver room, as it stands right now in our nation's capital, what does Deebo Samuel do in 2025 that would say, hey, I got to have this guy on my squad?
He has to stay healthy and he has to increase his target share from last year. It seems like the 49ers kind of moved off of him a little bit to focus on other parts of the offense. That might have been the Christian McCaffrey effect, where they were trying to run the ball a little bit more, just, for time of possession stuff. He also has to positively regress in the red zone. He saw his red zone targets and touchdowns go down. Touchdowns, obviously not something that we can rely on, but he does need to increase his output in the red zone. And he'll need to be more of a focus in Washington. I can see that happening. Now, Deebo for me is the prime example of there are no bad players. There are just bad values. And for the last 2 seasons, going into the season, I was absolutely out on Deebo Samuel. He was on my do not draft lists, had zero faith in him. And I was rewarded handsomely with the players I was able to acquire because I was staying away from Deebo. This year, I'm back around. I'm pro Deebo. One of the reasons is because Adam Peters is running the show in Washington. Mm-hmm. Adam Peters, formerly from the GM of the San Francisco 49ers, he knows exactly what he has in Deebo. They moved on, I want to say, from Brown and Zacchaeus already. I feel like that's a vote of confidence for Deebo Samuel. We're bringing you in as a free agent. We're giving you a big pile of money. You're going to go out there and you and Terry are going to tear stuff up. And so I feel like his usage is going to increase from last year in that Washington system. And Adam Peters knows what he's doing. One of the best ways to get yourself on my roster is to be somebody that Adam Peters likes.
It probably paid off that Samuel and Peters were in San Francisco together for his new opportunity in Washington. Speaking of Washington, they have another new receiver as of about 6 hours ago. And it's
Raiders legend.
His name is Michael Gallup, Raiders legend. How long was he with them? Like 8 weeks?
6 weeks? 6 weeks.
Something like that. And then the opportunity for him in Las Vegas was so great. He said, you know what? I'm good. I'm hanging it up. And he retires from the NFL. Now he comes back. I think he met with the Seahawks. He signs with the Commanders. This guy was a former 3rd-round pick, tears his ACL in 2021 and really has not been relevant fantasy-wise since then. Now, Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator in Dallas when Gallup was there in his golden years, for lack of a better term. He comes in behind McLaurin, behind Samuel. I'm kind of out of Derek Greer pointing this out in YouTube. He wants to know what our thoughts are on this signing. I have no interest from a dynasty standpoint. I have even less interest. I have just a little bit more interest in redraft, but I don't see how this guy takes a year off, comes in, signed 2 weeks after free agency started, and is somehow going to be a guy I need to care about in fantasy this year. Maybe the bigger question is how does he affect McLaurin and Samuel? I don't think he has a big impact on either one of those guys. I'm just kind of out on Gallup in general. I don't want to say it's a nothing burger, but whatever, the notch above nothing burger is, I think that's what this Gallup signing is.
I haven't looked at the contract, but I can't imagine it's more than a 1-year deal in the $1 to $2 million range. And that is a prime cut candidate when 53-man rosters come out. A lot of times you have an organization that brings in guys that their administration is familiar with, and they keep them around in camp. The system, coach up these guys. We can count on you to be a body that's going to show up. And then when the team is made on 53-man roster day, those guys all go bye-bye. Yeah. And I could very easily see that happening with Gallup. I mean, who didn't he beat out last year in Las Vegas? He did not win a job over some pretty
Trey Tucker's one of them.
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's just go to Trey Tucker right now.
Okay.
Why? And I mean, we could talk about Dynasty. There's short benches in the FFPC for Dynasty. So maybe this is less a Trey Tucker dynasty discussion, but redraft for sure. Looking at the never too early best ball ADP, Trey Tucker is wide receiver 100 going in the 20th round. Brendon, why should we not forget about Trey Tucker in our best ball drafts this year?
One of my favorite things to do in the offseason is make a list of the second-year wide receivers and then start to scout them, because my favorite thing in all of fantasy football is the third-year breakout for wide receivers. Trey Tucker is going to be a third-year wide receiver in 2025. That's not the whole story. Doing some digging after the Geno Smith trade, Geno Smith ranked among the top three quarterbacks last year in deep accuracy and deep completion percentage. He's definitely elite in being a deep passer. And then going over to Trey Tucker and looking at some of his stuff, he had an 88.4% snap share, ran 90%. He had a 90.4% route participation and ran 618 routes. He ran the fifth most routes in the NFL last year. Mm-hmm. He had a target rate of 13%, which was 104th. Something has to give there. The thing about Tucker is that he was 21st in deep targets. Out of all the wide receivers in the NFL, he was 21st in deep targets. But the problem was he had Aiden O'Connell, who was 15th in deep target accuracy, and Gardner Minshew, who was 25th in deep target accuracy, throwing the ball to him. What's going to happen when he gets Geno Smith in the building, who can get the ball down the field? Trey Tucker is a take the cap off type of wide receiver, and he's going into a situation where he's a little bit more savvy with route running, defensive backs, things like that, than he was as a rookie, especially given the amount of time he was on the field last year. Geno Smith creates a target opportunity for Trey Tucker that wasn't there last year. And if you want somebody that you can take at absolute value, who's going to outplay their ADP, Trey Tucker is as good a candidate as I've found so far doing the digging for this season.
John Spytek, the new GM for the Raiders. I said it on the show. I'll say it again. I once played against him in a high school football game.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he rocked us. We lost 48-3 to them. I believe they won the state championship that year. We got the field goal with about 30 seconds left in the game. We celebrated like we just won the Super Bowl.
Yay!
It was awful, but it was awfully fun as well. Spytek is I think a pretty intelligent guy. And I think the thing that we should understand here, or at least my take on it, regardless of what the Raiders do in the draft, I mean, if they decide to go with and they get a receiver, I don't think they maybe second day draft capital, but definitely not in the first round, at least where they sit right now. I don't think that really changes Trey Tucker's role in 2025. No. Like Bowers is there, Myers is there. They'll probably have a new running back. Well, they will have a new running back. But even if they add a rookie, like Trey Tucker is still going to be the lid lifter. Trey Tucker is a guy that is still going to be doing a lot more things this year, not only because he is taking a leap forward, but because he has a better quarterback, and a better quarterback that does things in a way that does the things that make him really good a lot better than what he had last year, for sure. I forgot to put it on. I'm putting it on right now, Brendon. Let's get the chain on because we're going to continue our Raiders conversation.
Yeah, I wasn't done because I was gonna mention that my absolute favorite stack right now over on Underdog is Brock Bowers early, then Geno Smith at value, and Trey Tucker very late. If you want to talk about spike games, tell me about a guy running wind sprints on 90% of snaps who has a quarterback that can get the ball downfield. We're talking Alec Pierce level, Christian Kirk level, like deep threat, spike game potential, and I love that for Trey.
You know, I want to talk about Geno Smith here as far as his dynasty value goes. Now he's a year older. This happens to everybody. You always get a year older every single season. This is not earth-shattering news. Geno Smith goes from Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Jaxson Smith-Njigba to Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, and Trey Tucker, obviously. I think on the surface, we say, well, his dynasty value has gone down from what he had last year to what he has this year. What's your perception of that in Superflex leagues? How differently are you treating Geno Smith in the Superflex Dynasty League than you were like now that he's in Las Vegas, as opposed to if he was still in Seattle.
I have been hammering him as my QB3. And in some cases, certain dynasty startups, I really like to wait on quarterback, especially if I'm on the back end of the first round, because I feel like the value that you get out of stacking wide receivers there is better than taking a running quarterback in the first few picks and then having to wait on the mid-level guys. So I like to start off with late, and this comes from redraft strategy, starting off in like the 8th, 9th, 10th rounds with the quarterbacks that are kind of sitting there, because you can get a lot of guys who outplay their ADPs. Very, very good value while you're stacking your team with the high productive skill position players. Geno Smith is a guy that I'm targeting almost everywhere. He is 2 years removed from quarterback 5 finish, over 300 points in PPR, and that was with Pete Carroll as his head coach. Pete Carroll knows what he's looking at. Smith didn't play all 17 games in 2023. He did last year and had a better year, but by a lot of accounts, a lot of charts that I see on Twitter, the Raiders' offensive line was better in pass protection. I think Geno Smith is going to be under a lot less pressure than he was in Seattle. I think he's going to a team with improved play. And if I'm reading the Raiders' strategy at this point, they're absolutely shoring up their defense behind Patrick Graham, and they're trying to put the pieces in place to rebuild the offense. What that's going to mean is in the draft, they're going to be focused on running back, X wide receiver, and building the offensive line. So I feel like Geno Smith is in an improved situation over last year. He's going to outplay what he did last year, and he still has the potential to be in that quarterback 2 range. And I am drafting him everywhere as a quarterback 3 because that's where he's sitting in drafts at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing about it. It's like he doesn't have to be awesome. Like where you are drafting him, you are getting a discount already. And with everything that the Raiders are doing, at least from whatever I'm seeing right now, with the hiring of Spytech, with the hiring of Carroll, I think that ship is going in the right direction right now.
Yeah, and don't forget the cheat code of running quarterbacks. He can bring you 250 to 350 yards rushing, which puts him in a class above Jared Goff, Derek Carr, those kinds of like 4,000-yard passers that don't run. Matthew Stafford. I'm taking Geno over them just because I get that little extra from his feet.
The other part of the Raiders backfield I want to talk about right now, running back 70 and running back 83 are Raheem Mostert and Sincere McCormick in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, 19th and 20th round picks. It is clear the Raiders are drafting a running back, maybe even 2 running backs. Is there any reason that it would be worthwhile to take some chances on Raheem Mostert late? Is he going to figure into this offense, or is he simply depth at this point of his career?
It looks like he's simply depth at this point in his career. He had 270-something yards rushing last year in 12 games. That's not great. It doesn't look like it looks like he lost a lot of efficiency over the last couple of years after he was coming off a year where he led the NFL in touchdowns from scrimmage with 22. He had his first 1,000-yard season. But the reason that was his first 1,000-yard season in year 8, year 9 was because he is an injury risk. I feel like he has an opportunity to show the Raiders, hey, look, I can be your 17-game guy and a productive running back. That's the opportunity. I don't think he's going to be able to do that. And if there's a situation where, forbid, the Raiders take Jeanty at 106, or they, like you said, they load up on 2 guys. I really like the combination of Bashal Tutin and Raheem Sanders, right? Like bring those 2 kids in. And then Sincere McCormick goes away because he's a UDFA. There's no investment in him at all, even though he had a good game or whatever. I feel like Mostert gets outplayed. Abdullah is too old, and they really address it in the draft. And the way the Raiders backfield is right now, they have more running backs rostered than any other team in the NFL, and they don't even have the one who's going to be starting game 1.
Right, exactly, which is wild. But hey, listen, this is the NFL. Nothing should surprise us anymore. And one of the things that we will be watching for is who the Raiders go with on day one, maybe. I mean, with Jeanty, that's a possibility. Day two, yeah. And then maybe day three, they go bang, bang with running backs this year. That is the running back situation. Let's talk about the receivers. I want to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about Tet McMillan. Let's talk about Matthew Golden. Let's talk about Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. Are we settled on Noel? Is it Noel over Noel?
I say Noel.
No. Okay, that's what I thought. So we're going to do that. We're going
Noel,
to talk about those
Christmas
guys.
in French.
And yes, Jack Bech, too. We'll talk about him and more. He is Brendon Booth from Player Profiler, hanging out with us here tonight on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. Eric Balkman, Brendon Booth, back after this.
Andrew Cooper here of Fantasy Alarm. And if you're anything like me, football season never ends. Super Bowl's over. Who cares? We got the combine. We got the draft. We got free agency coming up here. We got a lot of speculation to do. And the best way to take advantage of that is at myffpc.com. You know, mock drafts are fun. They're fine. But if you really want to get leverage, get in one of their never too early best ball drafts or never too early super flex drafts now, where you can take advantage of all your takes. I'm in there now because I got hunches, right? I got ideas for free agency. I got ideas for the drafts. I got ideas for the 2025 NFL season, and I want to get them on paper now. And I want to do so before the NFL draft, right? Before the cat's out of the bag. That's the beauty of these contests, right? You go in and you get set up, and the drafts are already going, and they end on April 24th, right when the NFL draft starts. So you can get in there, get all your takes in, take advantage of everything before everybody finds out what happens. Use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you can get in these tournaments, the never too early best ball and the never too early super flex contest, to get your shot at $10,000 or $40,000 grand prizes.
The FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments, as Coop just pointed out, going on at myffpc.com. $40,000, $10,000 grand prizes available whether you want to play the original or the Superflex version. Those tournaments will, they've been off and running for the last couple of months. They're going to conclude on April 24th. 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clocks available to you right now. $125, $35 entry fee, respectively. myffpc.com. That is myffpc.com. We are hanging out, having some fun tonight, talking with Brendon Booth at Big Boned FFB from Player Profiler, the Fantasy Football Advice Network, and fantasysportsadvice.com. We talked a lot about the veterans. Let's get into the rookies here tonight, and we'll lead things off with Tet McMillan. I'll be honest with you, and this is the story I tell. I think I tell this every week, so I'll make it short. I don't remember talking about this guy after the 2024 draft, when everybody's talking about the 2025 draft and looking ahead. I don't remember a lot of people talking about Tet McMillan. I just remember Luther Burden quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then McMillan, I don't know at what point it happened, but several months ago, all of a sudden I see like, hey, this is the wide receiver one. This is the guy that you want as the top receiver in this draft. And then I don't know if it was a combine thing or whatever. Maybe it was Matthew Golden's 40. But then I see McMillan falling. A lot of regular NFL mock drafts, Brendon, had him going as like a top 10 pick. Now I see him routinely in the 20s. So I have to ask you, is he your wide receiver one in this class?
No.
Ooh, spicy. How far down is he for you?
That's going to depend on draft capital at this point. If we're just going without draft capital, I will say wide receiver 3.
Oh, wow. Okay. So who you would put Burden and Golden ahead of him, or who would you put ahead of him?
Burden is definitely ahead of him. My wide receiver 1 is Trey Harris.
Oh my God. Okay. Do I have that? Okay, I got it on the list. Good. So we're going to have to talk about that. So what don't you like about McMillan that you like more with Burden and with Harris?
I don't know.
But that's it. Like, because I think a lot of people are sold on McMillan. Like, obviously the size, he ran the 4.48 at his pro day, which I think for his size is fine. But I'm listen, I've talked about McMillan on this program seemingly every week. And I always say I'm a little bit nervous about this guy. I'm not sold on this guy. I've had people come on who are McMillan, I wouldn't say truthers, but McMillan defenders that will say, well, this is why I like him. This is why you should like him. And I'm still not sold on him. I don't know if it's just the fact that he didn't get great separation in college. I don't know if it's just I worry about, maybe I'm body shaming him a little bit, but I've seen big body guys like this that fail in the pros, and I've seen it a lot over the last 15, 20 years. I don't know what it is, but I'm very lukewarm at best on McMillan, and it sounds like you are not sold on him either.
It's not necessarily that I'm not sold on McMillan. It's just I am very sold on Luther Burden and Trey Harris.
Okay.
So there are a couple things, and I've talked about this on my shows before. It's very similar to the scientific method. In science, you don't really come to a conclusion and then test it. You propose an idea, and then you try and figure out everywhere that you can make that idea fail. And I kind of do that in player evaluation. Everybody throughout the course of the rookie season kind of moves up and down my draft sheet based on the fact that I start with a take and then I hit it from every angle to see if it stays. And I have not done that yet with McMillan. I have not found a reason to not like him. I have found reasons doing the analysis on Burden and Trey Harris to like them more than I like McMillan. That might change, but at this point, that's kind of where I have them stacked. You mentioned the 40 time. I really don't look at 40 times a whole lot, except with tight ends. I tend to kind of dismiss them with running backs and wide receivers, just because we can see the analytics with their satellite speed. Are they hitting 22 miles an hour? Are they hitting 23 miles an hour? There aren't too many Tyreek Hill, Monterey Baldwins, but are they hitting those speeds that are going to be competitive on the NFL field? If it's yes, then I don't care what they did at the combine, right? Mm-hmm. But the big killer for me is the fact that McMillan is coming out of the Pac-12. And that's not the level of competition that I want to see a wide receiver succeeding against. I want to see a Trey Harris who has analytics that are absolutely off the charts, and that's against SEC defensive backs. So that's the one thing that kind of pushes McMillan down a little bit. If you're a big fish in a small pond, yeah, you're gonna produce, and that's exactly what he did. Trey Harris did the same thing in a much, much bigger pond.
All right, I don't know where to go from this. Let's go with Burden next.
Okay.
Burden is a guy that was everybody's wide receiver one at the end of drafting season. I should say after the end of the NFL draft in 2024.
Right.
And then he has a less than productive 2024 season with Missouri. I know plenty of people that will have him as their wide receiver one. And feel confident about that. He's right up there for you as wide receiver two. So clearly, where do you stand on Luther Burden III? He's your wide receiver two, like he's wide receiver two for a lot of people. You just happen to have him ahead of McMillan right now. Right. What does he do well? How does he succeed in the NFL? What type of career do you think he's lined up for once he gets to the next level?
So that last question I can't address yet.
Because we got a landing spot, right?
Right. And I have a point to make that will kind of address why I can't answer that. First of all, I have to start with he was a 5-star recruit. Mm-hmm. So like I'm starting there. Then I look at his usage at Missouri with a terrible quarterback and a limited limited routes run. The way that they had their offense structured is not something that really excites me, especially with the way they used him. A lot of screens. I mean, he has historic levels of production from plays within passes within 5 yards and behind the line of scrimmage. And the list of successful fantasy wide receivers who had similar rates in college is drastically low. There might have been 1 or 2 hits over the last 10 years, guys that were used the same way he was. But Luther Burden is my 2025 version of Brian Thomas Jr. And when I say that, what I mean is I absolutely whiffed on Brian Thomas Jr. because everything that I was going on was his usage at LSU. what he did in Jacksonville did not resemble what he did at LSU at all. He was a very specific, very limited wide receiver at LSU, and he was asked to do everything on the field in Jacksonville, and he succeeded. So in my analysis of him last year, I totally missed because I didn't think that he could do all the things that he did. So I'm not going to make that mistake with Burden. I'm going to take the potential. I'm going to take his 2023 season. I'm going to take the fact that he was a 5-star recruit, and I'm going to project that he's going to be able to do more in the NFL than what he was asked to do in 2024 at Missouri. So if that's the case, and if it's he was my wide receiver 2 right after the draft last year because Egbuka became my wide receiver 1 post draft because he didn't enter the draft. He was high on my list for 2024, but he didn't come out. So he immediately became my wide receiver 1 of the class. And he still might land there. The thing about McMillan, and the reason I say all this is going to change is because the number one, more important than athleticism, more important than college production, the number one thing for rookie wide receivers is their draft capital. And if Tet McMillan is the number 1 wide receiver off the board, he should be the number 1 in rookie drafts. At this point, what I like as far as career profile, I like Trey Harris the best. And then Emeka, Egbuka, Burden, McMillan, a lot of that can change depending on landing spot, but I think they're all in a pretty similar class. And I would not be surprised at all if McMillan is the 4th best wide receiver in the class.
Well, and you know what? I'm glad that I have somebody, I don't want to say on my side, but somebody that also can see McMillan just not being the wide receiver 1 and falling down at least in 2025 for how good he compares to his fellow rookie receivers for sure. We have to talk about Trey Harris here. We've avoided the elephant in the room long enough. He is a player that played 5 years of college ball, a little bit older coming into the NFL. Big frame and a guy that did it at a very high level in the SEC the last 2 years. He was at Louisiana Tech before that. I think that people are sleeping on him. I think that he is going to be good. However, I am not willing to put him as my wide receiver 1 in this class like you are. Sell me Harris. What's the elevator pitch on Harris? Why is he your number 1, Brendon?
It's a combination of metrics. His yards per route run against man coverage is unprecedented. It's in the 4 range, I want to say. His yards per route run against zone coverage is top 5 in the class. And then when you break down his first downs per route run, he was 3rd in the class. So those things aggregated push him up for me analytically above everybody else. Now, one thing I want to say, and we were remiss in the intro, I didn't get a chance to talk about my work at the Undroppables. Shout out Undroppables. Go follow on the Undroppables on YouTube and Uncovered on YouTube as well. Okay. The Undroppables has what's called the Unscore, and it's basically like an aggregation of analytics, and they take into account draft capital and things like that. And when that gets released, it's going to tell us a lot about the class of wide receivers that we're not seeing because the work hasn't fully been done yet. Trey Harris, with where he's at analytically, is going to be at the very, not necessarily number 1, but I am predicting that he's going to be within the very top of the unscores, and it's going to be competitive with the unscores that have come from Justin Jefferson and Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, a few of the guys who have been at the very top of the score over the last, I think it's correlated to 10 years back or something like that. What he did in college production wise is going to push him into the upper echelon of wide receivers. We have to wait on that. Go to theundroppables.com and wait for that to come out and snag it when you get it. Become a patron over on Patreon, whatever. But yeah, I'm gonna say, and based on some of the tape that I've watched, just scouting Jaxson Dart, he can do a lot more on the field than people give him credit for, especially at his size. And I see him as a huge breakout in 2025. And he's going to have a huge rookie year.
Which would be great because wherever you get him in your rookie draft, unless he gets crazy draft capital, it's probably going to be a value. You're going to be drafting him most likely behind the likes of Luther Burden, Tet McMillan, and the next guy I want to talk about with you in Matthew Golden. I have heard that Matthew Golden could be the wide receiver one in this class. By wide receiver one, I mean the first wide receiver drafted in the NFL draft, thanks to this incredible 40 time. Now, I've heard about how you don't want to double count something at the combine, right? If you expect a guy to run fast and he runs fast, you don't count that twice. You count it once because you expected him to do what he did. I expected Matthew Golden to be fairly fast in his 40. I did not expect him to be this fast. Now, you have already weighed in on how you feel about 40-yard dashes. Did this change the way that you evaluated Matthew Golden after you saw what he did at the combine, blazing that 40-yarder?
No, it didn't change my Matthew Golden evaluation. It changed my Isaiah Bond evaluation. When you come out and say that you're going to beat what Xavier Worthy did last year and you get beat by Matthew Golden, I did talk earlier about what we see in on-field play, and apart from the 40 Isaiah Bond's speed in the wide receiver drills and stuff like that, all that was fine. So going over to sumersports.com, shout out Sumer Sports, they have correlated the combine information and production at the wide receiver. And these are the categories to look at that correlate better to production than the 40 time. The 3-cone drill, the broad jump, the shuttle, the bench, the vertical, and age.
Wow.
So that's why I said earlier that I kind of dismiss some of those things, especially when I actually draft. I don't do enough pre-draft rookie dynasty drafts or startups. But I do wait until after the draft happens, and then I have the draft capital to kind of adjust whatever rankings I have based on talent. Matthew Golden is right there in my top 5 or 6. He and Isaiah Bond flipped based on his combine performance, but mostly it was because of the fact that he was more athletic than I thought he was going to be coming in, and he showed that in the other drills and some of his performance on the field. I was pretty impressed. I'm really having a hard time with Texas, and I want to call it the Steve Sarkisian effect. Quinn Ewers, there's a hit rate out there of 5-star quarterbacks in the NFL hitting in the NFL, and it's 25%. It drops down into the 10 and 12% range when you start talking about 4 and 3-star quarterbacks. And Quinn Ewers was a 5-star quarterback entering his draft at a young age. All indications should be that he is good. But the fact is that he regressed from 2023 to 2024. Everybody was calling for Arch Manning. Now Arch Manning is talking about the way that Ewers was benched was bad. And so I'm trying to, with Ewers especially, I'm trying to figure out if his situation is a matter of Steve Sarkisian just not being able to develop that quarterback. As far as the wide receivers are concerned, we are seeing what happened with Xavier Worthy last year, who also came out of Texas and was a burner. And even though he had first round draft capital based on that Chiefs trade, he basically profiled as a best ball spike guy. He has been overdrafted, and I'm scared that that's going to happen with Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden as well. I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain. If that happens to one of them, I think Isaiah Bond is the better candidate for that. I think Matthew Golden does more on the field. But I really want to see him in the NFL rather than at Texas, if you kind of catch.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think that, this leads me into my question about Isaiah Bond. Are the question marks there, and especially after, what you saw or what you didn't see for Bond at the combine, are you just letting somebody else draft him in your rookie draft in a vacuum right now? I mean, I know that draft capital can change that.
Yeah, I think for myself personally, in my home league especially, and in general startup builds, I am targeting the top 3 wide receivers and then stacking running backs on top of that, because I think this running back class is one that you can acquire as many of them as possible, and your chances of hit rate are going to be about equal from RB3 to RB20, right? So I want to have as many of them as possible. That markets me out of the wide receiver position. Now, if I find value in somebody, we'll talk about a bunch of them a little bit later, but if I find value in the second or third round of the rookie draft, or the fourth round of the rookie draft, or later on in the mid rounds of a startup, then I will be taking them, if, as far as ADP fallers. But I think running back is where I want to kind of load up on these rookies.
Okay, so I want to talk about another receiver here, and I feel like Brendon, I asked this of everybody I talk to, whether it's high stakes players, whether it's people in the industry, just people I know who play fantasy football. In non-IDP leagues, how do you handle Travis Hunter in rookie drafts? And how do you handle, we'll do this in redraft right now too. If in the FFPC never too early best ball tournament right now, the ADP I'm showing with Travis Hunter is wide receiver 52. That's at the 1109. That's Egbuka, Golden, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper territory. I guess anybody who drafts him, number one, it's going to be high in the draft. And if you are soaking that kind of draft capital, if you're an NFL team, you have to plan on him to play on both sides of the ball. Right. But as far as rookie drafts go, you can make a case for several lesser talents that should be drafted ahead of him if you don't believe Hunter is going to be on the field a whole lot. And if he is, defenses are going to know, hey, this is a play that they probably want to go to Hunter, and we can, target him, or we can bracket him, or do whatever, give him extra attention on defense. Just a weird situation. I don't know how I feel about it because I have nothing to compare this to. There's not really a precedent. How do you handle Travis Hunter in drafts right now? And I don't know is an acceptable answer.
I keep saying the words home league. My home league is an IDP, and he's my 101.
Yeah. Totally it.
Just because the potential out of the cornerback position to stack wide receiver points. I'm handling Travis Hunter with the idea in mind that he is going to be mid of the top 10 of this class as far as production and usage is concerned. Even if talent-wise he would be the wide receiver one. If he had come out after the season and said, I am not going to play cornerback at all, I'm only going to focus on wide receiver, he would be the first wide receiver off the board. Vice versa for cornerback. If he could have said, I don't want to play any wide receiver snaps, and he would have been the first cornerback to come off the board. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of bake in that he's not going to play 100% of wide receiver snaps. 60 on either side is probably fair. And if he's playing only 60% of the snaps, even if he has the best production, maybe, per snap production in the NFL, he's not going to have 150, 160 targets like Malik Neighbors did last year. You're not going to get to those levels. So is he going to outplay probably Jack Bech, Jalen Noel, Isaiah Bond, some of the guys that we have or will talk about? Yeah, probably. Is he going to pass the guys ahead of him? Probably not. Not if he doesn't play 100% as a wide receiver. So,
and I think like you know what you're getting into if you draft Travis Hunter in the first round of your rookie draft, and that could be a huge hit. It could be very underwhelming as well, but you know what you're getting into business with if you want to select Travis Hunter.
Absolutely.
Jaden Higgins, I believe it. You are pro Jaden Higgins?
Absolutely.
Jaden Higgins positive. Okay. He's a guy that I think is probably going to go on. Well, he's going to go on day 2. I don't think he'll sneak into day 1, but he's going to go day 2, probably round 2. I happen to like this guy quite a bit. It matters where he falls in the NFL as far as how high I'm drafting him in my rookie drafts, but the talent's there. And I think if he goes to the right team, man, he could have a big time rookie season, and he could have a really good rookie contract career with whatever team he ends up with first. Tell us more about Jaden Higgins and why you specifically, Brendon Booth, like him so much.
I was at the Senior Bowl. I got to watch a bunch of the pregame practices, the practice sessions, day 1, day 2, day 3. And I watched Jaden Higgins going up against some of the competition at the Senior Bowl. he did things on every level of the field that made me perk up and notice. He was beating cornerbacks off the line with his footwork. He was outrunning them on go routes. Pardon me. He made linebackers fall over close to the line of scrimmage. He was making mid-air, body-turning, body control catches with his arms out. He can make contested catches. He can run routes. He's fast, especially his athleticism at his size is pretty incredible. I feel like if he was in a different spot than Iowa State, more people would be talking about him and fewer people would be talking about Tet McMillan. What I've seen from Jaden Higgins, like I said earlier about like having a theory and then hitting it from all angles to try and make it go away, that has not happened with Jaden Higgins. Everything that I've wanted to see out of him, he's done. And the analytics are starting to show up to completely back up what the eye test tells you. So he's my wide receiver 5 at this point, and I'm running with that.
I want to ask you about Jalen Noel too, a player that drummed up a lot of interest at the combine, much like some of the other guys we have talked about already tonight. With Jalen Noel, what do we need to know about him? Certainly not the most discussed wide receiver in this class, but perhaps, Brendon, he's a little bit under discussed.
Yeah. So again, from the Senior Bowl, I was seeing things from both of these guys that I actually got to interview them, like a dual interview where I was talking to both of them. They're great teammates. They love Rocco Bech as much as I do. And Jalen Noel absolutely showed out as a route technician. He's going to be a slot receiver in the NFL. He's going to destroy people with his route running ability. He has a Ladd McConkey ceiling. He can be that guy. One of the things about McConkey coming out last year was how he absolutely destroyed people with his route running ability and his yak. Those were the things that pushed him off the charts. Jalen Noel is a similar type of wide receiver. If I had a comp to him, it would be Hunter Renfrow. We watched what Renfrow could do with his route running ability, with his feet at his size out of the slot for the Raiders, and he had a top 12 finish one of the years, and then his brains got scrambled, unfortunately. Shout out Hunter Renfrow. But I can see Jalen Noel repeating that Hunter Renfrow 2021 season over multiple seasons, staying healthy.
The Senior Bowl is something we've talked a lot about. We touched on the combine. Jack Bech really was good in both. Who's your best comp for Jack Bech? Because this is a guy that really showed out at the Senior Bowl in front of everybody. And it seems like the momentum keeps growing and growing. And sometimes with players like this, Brendon, I get caught up in the positivity and the hype. And I don't want to do that with Jack Bech. So if you could bring me back down to earth, or even bring me up to the stratosphere even more, who's the best comp that you could think of for Jack Bech right now?
I'm going to lift this straight from Player Profiler, and that's Josh Palmer. I think they're built entirely the same. I think Bech is a little bit slower, but they do have similar skills down the field. The one thing that's a little bit different for Jack Bech is his ability in contested catch situations. And he said it at the Senior Bowl. It's not a 50-50 catch. It's a 75%. It's a 75-25 catch because I'm coming down with the 50-50 ball 75% of the time. He has ultimate confidence. He is an older prospect, but he's a positional transition. He was a tight end, recruited as a tight end at LSU. Now, something about him made LSU think we can take this 6'1" guy and turn him into a tight end in the SEC. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know why they would ever think that. But you don't get recruited by LSU if you're not good. So I excuse me, but I feel like his ceiling is going to be a wide receiver 2. He's likely going to figure into the wide receiver 3-4 range for his career. He's not going to be anybody's primary target. He might benefit from maybe an injury and a slight increase in targets situationally throughout his career, but he's not going to be a guy where he becomes the primary receiver in an offense. But I love him.
I like him quite. He's going to be one of those guys we love to root for, but understand the limited ceiling of him being a dominant dynasty asset at any point in his career. Question from the chat. We got our buddy Permar99 hanging out in there. He wants to know Elic Ayomanor. Now, I've heard Ayomanor. I've heard Ayomanor. I think it's Ayomanor, right?
I've heard Ayomanor.
Ayomanor. Okay.
That's what I've gone with.
Ayomanor. Let's go with that. Elic Ayomanor, is he going to sneak into the first round of the NFL draft? There's a non-zero chance of anything, like I always say. Right. I don't think that's likely, but day 2 for sure, right?
Denver in the second round is where I'm like putting him. I'm not the biggest Ayomanor fan. Go Cal. I hate Stanford. But when you start to dig into the Ayomanor layers, you start to find how much one game against Colorado with Travis Hunter covering him kind of feeds into everybody's narrative. And he had a huge drop rate in college. He wasn't very efficient as a route runner. There's a lot not to like. And so I'm not even considering him in my drafts.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too is like when it's fine if these guys don't get the draft capital, but they got to show out. And Ayomanor has not shown out to be close to elite in anything. I mean, maybe he's going to be fine as a pro, but again, you have to understand, like, if you get into business with him in your rookie draft, don't have lofty expectations for what this guy could develop into.
And my comp for him is Michael Wilson.
Michael Wilson. I've heard that. I've heard and like I know they both went to Stanford, but there are, like, if you watch them, there are a lot of similarities between those two guys. I don't have a comp for this guy at all, but Tez Johnson crushed the Senior Bowl. Tez Johnson. Also, I mean, I feel like I've got this from a movie somewhere. I've eaten meals heavier than Tez Johnson.
Right.
And I don't, exactly. And I don't know how I know how he succeeds in the NFL. He's a gadget guy. I don't think he's ever going to develop into, like, hey, this is a primary guy on the outside or in the slot where we're going to feature him every game. So that could work out fine if you draft him on day 3. But as far as fantasy goes, should we just eliminate this guy? I'm not seeing, unless it's like best ball or something like that in redraft. I don't really see much from Tez Johnson that gets me excited, even though he crushed these corners at the Senior Bowl. Nobody could cover him, and I still couldn't be less excited about him. Maybe I'm being weightist or sizist here. Am I?
Yeah. Yes. And that's totally okay. It's totally okay to pick apart somebody's profile. It's bad to focus on only one part of the profile, but there's a lot of other parts of the profile where Tez Johnson comes up short. Now, we have to take into consideration BMI, 40 time, what they do athletically. When you start coming up against certain spots where they miss in a couple of different areas, that's when the red flags start coming up. If some guy is good all around and he runs a slow 40, whatever. If he's tiny and runs a slow 40, that's not great.
Right.
When he goes to his pro day with hand clocks and he's still slow, that's not great either. Now, I'm going to bring up the AWS, the satellite speed and stuff. Dude hit some speeds that in the open field that are pretty remarkable, but 156 pounds at the Senior Bowl, you're not going to get a lot of traction. Best ball, I like him. I like Xavier Worthy in best ball, but in redraft leagues and Dynasty, I tend to stay away from wide receivers like that.
I want to go rapid fire on these last 3 guys here.
Sure.
Because these are 3 players we don't typically
That's about all they are deserving of.
On this show. Well, but maybe more. So I want to lead things off. Before I was stalking you on Twitter, I never heard of Brew McCoy before. Have not heard a lot of people talk about him. Who is Brew McCoy, and why do we need to care about him? Or at least not care about him, but know about him here, Brendon?
Brew McCoy is a wide receiver out of Tennessee, 229 pounds at 6'3", and he is a 24-year-old entering the draft. So and he started his career at USC. So it calls to mind. Oh crap! I forgot his name. The kid Velus Jones.
Oh yeah.
You have a senior citizen entering the draft, but the thing about Brew McCoy is that when he was recruited by USC, he was the number one wide receiver according to 24/7. He was the number one wide receiver recruit, 5 stars, like top of the board. He's had some injury issues and maybe some attitude issues. He's had some things that got in his way in his, career path, leading to 5 years in college instead of 3 and a 24-year-old draft age and all that stuff. Going back to what I was saying about Quinn Ewers and Luther Burden, there's something real there when a guy is 5 stars out of high school. So I'm going to keep an eye on him. If there's an NFL team that thinks that he's something to work with, then hey, let's go for it. If he becomes a UDFA and he's a day 5 guy, was it day 5, day 4 guy, or day 3.5 because it comes after the 7th round. If he's an 8th rounder, I'm probably not gonna care much about him. There are a lot of guys that I love that were in that situation. Keelan Doss is one of them. Shout out UC Davis Aggies. So yeah, Brew McCoy had the potential to be an absolute star in the NFL, and who knows? The chances of that happening are probably down in the single digit percentages, but still non-zero.
And by the way, Permar weighing in as our producer Matt Deutsch threw his comments up about Ayomanor, excuse me. Could go as high as 29th to Washington. We'll see. And maybe he's the guy for McLaurin. Again, we always say non-zero, or at least I always say non-zero chance of anything. Don't think it's likely, but maybe. And that might be ceiling as far as we're talking about the NFL draft this year. Speaking of people who like to hang out and watch this show, Bill Hollywood, who's in here tonight, brought this guy up to me in December or January before I was like fully engrossed into wide receivers. Nick Nash, a guy who put up really good numbers over on the left coast. Nick Nash is a guy that is not being talked about as even a day 2 guy. In fact, he could technically go undrafted. But refresh my memory, Brennan, this is a guy who has not been a wide receiver his whole career, right?
Right. Yeah, he was recruited as a running quarterback at San Jose State. Shout out NorCal. Shout out Bo McBrayer. Go to Bo McBig Time and Big Time Spice Company and get some of his hot sauce. NorCal. Anyway, Bo lives about 10 minutes from me. So Nick Nash was a wide receiver at San Jose State, converted from quarterback. He did play, I want to say 3.5 seasons as a wide receiver, but those last 2 wide receiver seasons, he was very, very productive. Granted, San Jose State is not a big school. A lot of warning signs here. Old draft age, not very fast, very big, converted from another position. He would be the outlier of outliers to be successful in the NFL. But just like Jack Bech, he's a great story. And you love to see guys like this, especially if he can get some kind of success. If he can have, a season with 30 catches, 40 catches, I would be very, very pleased.
Yeah, it'd be impressive if he was able to pull that off. I want to make sure I'm getting the pronunciation right on this guy. Isaac Tisla? It's
Tisla.
Tisla. Okay.
Yeah.
Isaac Tisla. Why is he somebody we should know about here, Brendon?
Because
and know how to pronounce his name correctly, obviously.
He's 6'4", 215 pounds, with 10-inch hands and a 96 athleticism score, which was number 1 among wide receivers at the combine. He ran a 4.43. He had a 1.5 10-yard split, a 39.5-inch vert, 10.9 on the broad jump, 685 as a 3-cone drill, 405 shuttle, and benched 17 reps. So
now,
he is.
Now I'm gonna stop you there.
Yeah.
I feel like you're setting me up here. You know the meme on X or whatever where it's Jonah Hill and Billy Bean and Jonah Hill like, Billy, this is blah blah blah. He does this blah 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 blah. but here's why people don't like him. You've given me all the good, super
Right.
incredible athlete. Okay, so why aren't more people talking about Isaac TeSlaa?
Production wasn't there. He was on a terrible Arkansas offense with a non-productive quarterback. I'm a Razorbacks fan. I'm still not out on Treylon Burks, and I really like TeSlaa. I still haven't snuffed out my candle for Raheem Sanders. I'm excited to see him this year. And even if Jalen Green does get into the NFL, or KJ Jefferson, somebody takes a chance on them, my Razorback love, Woo Pig, Go Hogs, is going to like carry him over some people. That's the only reason that I know who Isaac TeSlaa is because I watch Razorbacks football. And what I saw from him was good. The problem was they just didn't throw the ball very much. When they did throw the ball to him, his per catch metrics are ridiculous. This guy has some eye-popping numbers when you start really digging into the groundwork of what he was doing on the field with his limited opportunity. And he, given the right situation, he could very well outplay a lot of incumbent wide receivers in the NFL. When they get him out on the field and they start throwing him the ball 100 times a season, his athleticism and his receiving ability are going to carry the day. And so if you're looking for a guy in the 4th round of your rookie drafts, or very, very late, almost like waiver wire type draft capital, who's going to suddenly be like, I'm here in the NFL, it's Isaac TeSlaa. And again, he was doing it against SEC backfields. So defensive backfields.
Right.
So I'm really high on him. The production suppresses him. Nobody cares about Arkansas. So, and everybody got burned by Treylon Burks before. So they're, helmet scouts are not going to like him either. But as far as sleepers, he has, I think, the biggest sleeper potential of the wide receiver class this year.
You don't have to invest a lot in him in rookie drafts. Obviously we'll see where draft capital ends up, but this is the perfect home run swing in your 4th round of rookie drafts for sure. So knowing your Raiders and Razorbacks fandom, where does the Raiders drafting Darren McFadden rank on your all-time favorite days of your life list?
That it was pretty close to the top. I was so psyched. It was yeah, that was a great day.
That was a good day.
Almost as good as Sebastian Janikowski draft.
Oh, God bless. And I'm a big Florida State. I'm wearing my Florida State national champion sweatshirt. So I love Seabass. I was a big fan of his.
I have a on my show, I've had Kenny King Jr., son of running back Kenny King of the Raiders. And growing up, he knew Sebastian Janikowski, and the stories he tells about the way that Janikowski could party and then go nail 4 for 4 over 50 yards on Sunday, that like hung over and on 2 hours of sleep. Just so great. The stories are wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the legend about when he was partying in New Orleans the night before the Sugar Bowl when Florida State was going to be playing for the national championship. And I think he kind of just told Bobby Bowens, like, look, I'm in New Orleans for Mardi Gras, or like, but not Mardi Gras, but I'm in New Orleans. Like I'm partying. I don't care. I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. You're going to do what you're going to do.
He's a kicker. It's not like he has to be in shape or healthy
and he wasn't in shape, and he was unbelievable. Like that's incredible stuff. Okay. We are way up against it. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to step out and take a quick break. I don't know how much we'll get to tight ends. I want to focus in on running backs, and obviously we have to talk Jaxson Dart as well before we get out of here at the top of the hour.
And your last question on the show sheet is very, very, or no, the last running back question on the show sheet.
Oh, we'll get to him for sure.
Okay.
We will get to him. A guy that I can promise viewers of this show, we've never talked about this guy before. We're talking about him tonight. He is Brendon Booth from Player Profiler. Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere.
Andrew Cooper here of Fantasy Alarm. And if you're anything like me, football season never ends. Super Bowl's over. Who cares? We got the combine. We got the draft. We got free agency coming up here. We got a lot of speculation to do. And the best way to take advantage of that is at myffpc.com. Mock drafts are fun. They're fine. But if you really want to get leverage, get in one of their never too early best ball drafts or never too early Superflex drafts now, where you can take advantage of all your takes. I'm in there now because I got hunches, right? I got ideas for free agency. I got ideas for the drafts. I got ideas for the 2025 NFL season, and I want to get them on paper now. And I want to do so before the NFL draft, right? Before the cat's out of the bag. That's the beauty of these contests, right? You go in and you get set up, and the drafts are already going, and they end on April 24th, right when the NFL draft starts. So you can get in there, get all your takes in, take advantage of everything before everybody finds out what happens. Use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you can get in these tournaments, the never too early best ball and the never too early super flex contest, to get your shot at $10,000 or $40,000 grand prizes.
I want to bring up, before we go on, just to let everybody know, the Big Gorilla Tournament with the FFPC going on right now. MyFFPC.com, $1 million grand prize, $350 entry fee. You'll get a $50 discount for every third team you buy. Draft's already off and running, both live and slow. The early Rampage portion and the 7 Bananas promos are live. For more information on those, myffpc.com is where to go. Join the Big Gorilla today. The rookie running backs is something we have not talked a lot about tonight with Brendon Booth from Player Profiler, Fantasy Football Advice Network, fantasyadvice.com. Did I get what's the last one?
Fantasy Sports Advice.
FantasySportsAdvice.com. Thank you so much. I knew I was missing a word in there. I might be missing something on TreVeyon Henderson, because there are plenty of people talking about him potentially being a first-round pick, maybe even being the second running back drafted. Let's answer that first question. What's the likelihood that he is selected in the first round come April 24th, Brendon?
I don't think it's good. And that's simply because of running back valuation and draft capital. It does not make a whole lot of sense to draft running backs in the first round unless they are a generational talent like Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. A lot of people are tacking that onto Ashton Jeanty. I don't necessarily disagree with them. A lot of people are tacking that onto Omarion Hampton. I don't necessarily disagree. In last year's class, I thought TreVeyon Henderson could have been the running back one of that class, but he chose not to come out. I think it might have been a good idea for him because he won a national championship and got some NIL money in his pocket. That's kind of some insurance in case you get injured as a rookie or whatever. Quinshon Judkins didn't make it the best situation for him because he was no longer a feature back. He was part of the committee, but I saw a lot of explosivity. I saw a lot of things that he did away from running the football between the tackles that should kind of pique your interest. He is in the wider. Sorry, we were on wide receiver so long. He is in the running back 3 conversation right behind Hampton. I just don't see more than Hampton and Jeanty being drafted in the first round.
Game-breaking potential with Henderson. It's there.
Yeah, we saw it in the NCAA playoffs, right, where he caught a little wheel route and just absolutely just took it to the house, destroyed the defensive backfield. He's got that upside. Whether he's going to be able to handle a 250 carry load like Josh Jacobs did a couple years ago, that remains to be seen if any NFL team wants to do that to their running backs. But explosivity is that's one of the things that he has.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of the things that NFL teams desire at that position right now as well. Caleb Johnson, maybe not the most explosive running back in the world. In fact, 7 catches in his first 2 years combined at Iowa. He does get 22 of them this past year.
Yeah.
Gets in the end zone 23 times, 1,500 plus rushing yards. He's a bruiser, 6 foot, 225. You know what you're getting with him. What kind of running back is he going to be at the next level? I fear he might just be a first and second down banger, but maybe you can talk me out of that.
Well, 20 catches in a season seems to be the threshold. And it was also for Iowa, who is reputationally not a huge offensive school. So the fact that Caleb Johnson became the offense in Iowa last year is not surprising. I think they might have even done it on purpose. It would have been targeted to give him some pass catching stuff just to put it on tape for the NFL. I like Caleb Johnson a lot. One of the things about this running back class is that you can go Jeanty and then you can go Hampton. Some people will quibble that Hampton is over Jeanty. I'm not going to be in that camp. But then starting at running back 3, you have a list of probably 7, 8, maybe even 10 guys who all are kind of like, they jump each other and fall in the rankings for me all the time. Caleb Johnson was one of them. Devin Neal's another. Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins. There are so many running backs in this class that can get on the NFL field tomorrow. It's really hard to kind of like split hairs. You just have this kind of floating island of plastic garbage in the ocean of running backs, and pick which one you like the best. They're all probably going to finish the same because of the running back environment in the NFL. And if you play 0 running backs, this is your year.
Right. I think the combine, we've been dwelling so much on it tonight, but without, like pro days, I put some stock into it, but I think the combine is something I put a lot more stock in. And Bishal Tootin, wowzers penny, to get an Inspector Gadget reference on the show tonight. Unbelievable stuff at the combine. I think Lance Zierlein from NFL.com had a lot of really good positive things to say about him potentially being a 3-down force in the NFL, given the opportunity. How did your personal opinion change, if it did at all, about Tootin after what you saw he did at the combine?
Well, it didn't really change. So he was one of the guys for me to watch, and I mentioned it on a pre-Senior Bowl show. He was the running back that I was going to the Senior Bowl to focus on. I got there, and on the day 1 practice, it looked like he wasn't giving maximal effort on each rep, the same way other guys were. Now, we watched like special teamers, especially in college, and they run down the field on a kickoff. It's a touchback. He was not one of the guys who sprints to the back of the end zone on that rep. And that started to worry me. And then I started talking to a guy who had been speaking with Tootin's agent, who said he is coming off an injury. He's about 75, 80% now. He's not out there to hurt himself.
This was at the combine?
No, this was at the Senior Bowl.
Senior Bowl, got it.
He should be ready by the Senior Bowl. If he's not, he's going to choose not to run the 40.
Should be ready by the combine, you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Right. The fact that he ran the 40 at the combine tells me that he was fully 100% go, and he looked great. I feel like he's small, but his size profile is a little bit more like Jahmyr Gibbs. And we saw what Jahmyr Gibbs got when David Montgomery went down last year, the opportunity that even a smaller back like that could do with a 3-down roll. I'm not Bishal Tootin he's a dog, and we've seen his pass catching ability. He's basically a 5'8.5" wide receiver. So I feel like he can absolutely outplay his ADP, and he sneaks into that top 12 of the running back class and could, for me, finish as high as RB6 or 7, something like that. Just because it's so flux.
Tootin's just one of these guys that makes this class so great. And we saw, you saw up close and personal at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
And then we saw in the combine too, how good he was. FFPC players are drafting Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee as running back 47 in the 14th round right now. Ironically, right after Tootin. Do you think people are sleeping on Sampson? How do you feel about Sampson? I mean, I keep hearing over and over again, and I've kind of formed my opinion around this too. He's probably going to be a better pro than his teammate at Tennessee was last year, and Jalen Wright. How do you feel about Dylan Sampson at this upcoming professional level?
I love his speed, and I had the idea that he was going to be the fastest running back at the combine, but he didn't run. So I like him. Again, he falls into that RB3 to 12 range for me. Similar to Achane, he's a smaller guy, but he's super, super fast. And he showed that he can run between the tackles at Tennessee. His explosive rate is off the charts. There's potential there.
Okay. So I want to get into Ollie Gordon. I was on Chad Parsons from Under the Helmet. We were talking. This was like several months ago. I was on his show, and he said, "Well, who are you excited to see, or just research and scout for this upcoming rookie class?" And I did bring up Ollie Gordon because I felt like this guy put up crazy numbers on really bad teams, and then I saw the combine, and I'm kind of out on him right now. Is that the right play? Are you of the same mind where after you saw what Ollie Gordon did, you're kind of like, I probably should have looked elsewhere and let somebody else take him? Because that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, knowing what he did from a collegiate production standpoint, but I'm definitely down on him more so than I thought I'd be at this point in the drafting season.
I don't see him as a marquee back coming out of the draft, but we know what his potential could be, and there are some things that are value adds that players do, like playing on special teams or being very good in pass blocking situations. And I think that's one of the things with Ollie Gordon is that he comports himself well and has the size to be a nice blocking running back on blitz pickups, third down situations, things like that. That would A, impress NFL coaching staffs, and B, keep him on the field if he was in a situation where he was starting. And he is another one. It's going to be repetitive, but he's another one that's right there in that section for me, where like he is definitely top 12, but not top 3.
You know, draft capital, maybe more so than in recent years, is really going to define a lot of these running backs this year, because they're in this big glut, right now where we look at not a lot of separating these guys. 2 players I have heard a lot of people talk about that, this is my guy. I love this guy. This is my favorite running back from the class. Devin, Neal, and we talked about him a lot on the show. But who we have not talked about on the show a whole lot is Brashard Smith. And I hear a lot of people that are just going cuckoo for Brashard Smith right now. How do you feel about him? And is the hype warranted, Brendon?
That's a great question. Shout out my partner, Chev, who helps me host the Player Profiler today on Friday. He is a huge Brashard Smith fan. I took him in a mock draft last night just to honor Chev. I like him, and since the Senior Bowl, it's just been Brashard Smith hype. There were guys that impressed me more. Devin, Neal for one. Trevor Etienne was another one. So I'm kind of ambivalent on Brashard Smith.
Oh, okay.
Again, he's very athletic. He's very fast. He's very capable as a receiving running back, but there aren't a lot of footholds in this running back class. It's too wide open. And like you said, draft capital is going to mean everything. If you're a running back and you're getting drafted in the 2nd, 3rd round, and you're going to Cincinnati where you have better draft capital than Chase Brown, we've seen guys who we thought were good lose their jobs in fantasy because they got out drafted. This is definitely a class that could do that to a whole lot of people. And it's going to be important. April 25th is probably the most important day of this year for fantasy running backs.
I can't watch a show, listen to a podcast, read an article without people talking about watching the NFL draft for pleasure, but also understanding they are going to witness the annihilation of backfields, fantasy backfields. Maybe not so much on day 1, but day 2, it's going to be, and I don't want to classify it with war, but it's going to be like just a wasteland. Fantasy, it's just like what you think is a strong stable of running backs in your dynasty roster right now could look like smithereens on, like you said, April 25th.
I'll give you an example. 2023 draft. I go into the day as a very strong Tyler Algier holder.
Yeah.
Where my buddy and I go to the bar, we're watching the first round. And as soon as Bijan Robinson got drafted by the Falcons, I had an absolute conniption. Now, take that and that's going to account for 20 NFL teams during this draft.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always bring up when I was doing a live radio show, terrestrial radio, where I was under the FCC. And it was the year that I had a bunch of James Robinson shares, and the Jaguars decided to use their second first-round pick on Travis Etienne.
Yeah.
I don't know how I was not kicked off the air permanently. I don't know how I held my tongue. It was crazy. But I digress. We could do a lot of content on that. I have to do some content on the pride of UC Davis here. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. Is it Lan Larison?
Larison, yeah.
Lan Larison.
Yeah.
The only guy, or the guy that is tweeting about him or posting about him on X more than anybody else that I saw is Brendon Booth, and he's here to tell you everything about Lan Larison tonight out of UC Davis.
Lan Larison. Okay. First of all, I live in Davis. I grew up here. I became a fan of UC Davis in the early 80s. Watched them pump out some pretty good NFL players. Ken O'Brien is one, quarterback from the Jets. Mike Wise was another one, Raiders defensive end. Got a jersey right here.
There it is.
Tragically passed. Rest in peace, Mike. But somehow UC Davis, as a non-scholarship Division II school, was putting out Bo Eason as a safety for the Houston Oilers, and a whole bunch of NFL players. JT O'Sullivan from the QB school. Kevin Daft was a backup quarterback for the Oilers, I want to say. Tennessee Oilers, maybe. Anyway, long legacy of success, even for a Division II non-scholarship school. They eventually adopted scholarships, eventually moved into the FCS, and last year had their best season that they had in 40 years. They made the FCS playoffs. They unfortunately went down to, I want to say Montana State. No, it was somebody better. I didn't get a chance to see the game that they lost. Anyway, their running back was a kid named Lan Larison, who came out of Idaho as a quarterback. Took him a couple years to get a foothold, but in 2023, they had a guy ahead of him on the depth chart who was pretty good. But in 2023, Larison came up and was the starting running back. He finished that season with 178 carries, 1,101 yards, and 6.2 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns. But what was kind of surprising was he had over the 20 catches that we look at. Mm-hmm. The year before that, he had 25. Last year, in his final year at Davis, he had 284 carries for 1,465 yards, 17 touchdowns. He caught 62 catches for 847 yards and 6 more touchdowns. I watched this guy have 200-yard rushing games. I watched him have 200-yard receiving game, 150-yard receiving games. Out of the backfield, he's 6'1", 215 pounds. He's very, very big for a running back, but he runs away from defenses. He hurdles guys. He was a quarterback, so he can be used in a wildcat, kind of like Darren McFadden. He can throw the ball. He can do everything on the field, and he can do it at an NFL level. Second week of the FCS playoffs, he hurt his ankle, could not participate. He had he was invited to the Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl, had to decline the invitation, didn't go to the combine. So there's no pre-draft process to watch. There is another guy from Delaware who's the FCS running back of the moment. But as of November, it was all about Lan Larison. We've seen FCS success stories before. We like Pierre Strong is in the NFL right now. Austin Eckler was an FCS guy. Dylan Laube, same thing, smaller school, explosive skill set. Lan Larison is that guy from 2025. At this point, he looked like he could have been as high as a 4th rounder if he had been able to go through the pre-draft process. It looks like at this point, he's probably going to be a UDFA. But the fact is that NFL teams were scouting him and talking to him all season long. He was on the Senior Bowl watch list, and he's definitely been in getting ready for the draft. And he could be He could be just a physical marvel on the field. I've seen him do some things that people shouldn't do, and he's done it as a running back.
I should also mention another UC Davis guy that's in the NFL right now is a punter for my Green Bay Packers in Daniel Whelan. I forgot about that. The pride of Ireland, the pride of UC Davis, and maybe now the pride of the Green Bay Packers. We're running short on time. I want to skip the tight ends. I have to ask you about your quarterback rankings. I'm going to tee you up for this. Who is your quarterback 3 in this year's class?
Shedeur Sanders.
Who is your quarterback 2 in this year's class?
Cam Ward.
Oh my God, that must mean Jaxson Dart is your quarterback 1. A guy that, now listen, you talk about you're a Razorbacks fan, but I know how crazy you are about Trey Harris, and now you're crazy about Jaxson Dart. Maybe you're a Rebels fan here. I don't know. Sell us on Jaxson Dart, a guy who, by the way, to your point, or to your point you're about to make, this guy was a 2nd or 3rd round pick like a month ago, and now I see him mocked all the time in the 1st round. Tell us about Jaxson Dart and why you think he's better than Ward and Sanders.
Well, the 1st round grade comes from the dearth of quarterbacks in this class. If it was a class where there were 3 or 4 quarterbacks that could be considered ahead of him, he would definitely be a 2nd rounder. And there's nothing to indicate that he's not going to be a 2nd rounder now. I had high hopes for him, and I came to my conclusion as to where he stands in this draft class by continuously asking myself, would I be comfortable with the Raiders pre-Geno Smith trade drafting Jaxson Dart at the 106? I've been out on Shedeur for a while. I don't want the Raiders to take him. His offense was too limited at Colorado. He was very good, very efficient at the things that he was asked to do, but he wasn't asked to do NFL things a whole lot. I watched Cam Ward games. I saw him absolutely break down and get saved by the referees against Cal last year. I've seen some of his decision-making that I really have a hard time with. There are things that I liken it to 2023 when I was watching a lot of Bo Nix and Michael Penix. They were in the Pac-12. I was watching them closely, and there were some problems that I saw, or 2022. There were some problems that I saw with their footwork, staring down receivers, bad arm action, that kind of thing. And I knew that they needed to fix those things in the 2023 season to have draft hope in 2024. And they did it. Watching the tape from 2023, they absolutely fixed what their problems were in 2022. Cam Ward he's had quite a career in college football. He's a 2-time transfer, and he's coming out of Miami. And I watched him continue to make bad decisions that when he's throwing the ball from one side of the field to the other, and he's this mature in his game, it screams Jameis Winston to me, which is kind of why I tend to back off a little bit. Over the last couple of days, I've seen some analytics that are kind of bringing me back onto the Cam Ward train. Analytically, he did a lot more than what I saw with the eye test, right? I was surprised at his efficiency, if you know what I'm saying. It doesn't take away his decision-making. Again, with Jaxson Dart, I wanted to completely break down how high I thought he should go. And every turn where I tried to say, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like this, and break down that QB1 spot, I couldn't do it. There wasn't enough there. I watched film from 2022. He was a small, like a slider build, and all of his throws seemed to be maximal body effort. He was like throwing his whole entire body into the throw. Don't like to see that. I want to see like just arm action. Now, good push off with the legs, but not throwing your whole body into it. 2024 film, he's not doing that anymore. He has been maligned for deep ball skills, but he actually was one of the better deep ball throwers in college football. He benefited from the Lane Kiffin offense, but it was also an RPO offense, and he ran the RPO efficiently. He had 1,500 yards rushing in his final 3 seasons. That's the kind of value add at the quarterback position in fantasy that you have to have. The guy averaged 500 yards rushing per season. So he can run. He can run the RPO. He's very accurate in the intermediate and close to the line of scrimmage throws and over the middle of the field. And he can throw the ball deep, especially when he's got a guy like Trey Harris that he's throwing the ball to. So every level of his game, the improvement every season, which Quinn Ewers doesn't have. He has regression.
Yeah.
Some of the deep ball numbers everywhere along the line. I just was like, I like that about Dart. There's not anything that I don't like about that. There's not anything I don't like about that. Right. So eventually I was like, well, crap. I figure Cam Ward is going to go before 106.
Yeah.
I don't want Sanders. I want Jaxson Dart at 106. Geno Smith changed that. I don't think Dart is going to last to the second round. So I don't think the Raiders are going to have an opportunity. I thought the Dart could go to Las Vegas and start year one, but they made the Geno Smith decision instead. I love everything about what Dart has put on his resume.
Where will he end up come April 24th? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. Brendon Booth joining us tonight. Brendon, this is so good. Give us, again, the quick and dirty, everything you're doing for Player Profiler, the Fantasy Football Advice Network, and FantasySportsAdvice.com. All
right. Player Profiler _now on Twitter. I do the Player Profiler today on Friday, and I do the Dynasty Stock Market on Tuesday. Undroppables, I do the Dynasty Pulse and the Raiders Uncovered, which is a weekly Raiders news thing. Fantasy Sports Advice Network, we exclusively premiere the Dynasty Pulse, and then that drops on the Undroppables and Fantasy Football Plus. Find me at Big Boned FFB, also on Blue Sky, just Big Boned, no FFB part. And I mean, if there's one thing you can count on me for, it's data-driven, unhinged bullshit. And I welcome you, whether you agree with me or disagree. I said in the tweet about this show, I'm not going to hit on all of my takes, but you're not going to want to miss them.
It's still fun. It's like this is why we work ourselves through it. We talking about it out loud with other people helps us refine our process. It helps us get dialed in more. And I know that you helped all the viewers tonight doing that on their own. So thank you so much.
Maybe I can win some big money.
Exactly. We're having to do this again sometime soon. And we'll have you back for sure. Fantasy Football Players Championship at myffpc.com. The Never Too Early tournaments, Dynasty Orphans, and the Big Gorilla tournament. Check it out there, myffpc.com. I want to thank Brendon and our producer, Matt Deutsch. We'll be back at 7 o'clock next Thursday with DraftSharks Shane Hallam. Have a great weekend. Oh, by the way, I got to let you get back to it, Brendon. Your Razorbacks are in a dogfight with Kansas right now.
Oh, no.
So go ahead.
I do want to quickly shout out Andrew Cooper, who you saw earlier. Tight end guru. Follow him. He's nice enough to come on my show and do tight end expert rookie stuff. And also Howard Bender. Threw the hat on for Howard. And two guys that are a couple of the greatest guys that I've come across in the fantasy space. So I just wanted to shout them out.
I love them both, and thank you for that because they are tremendous individuals for sure. For Brendon, for Matt, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network by the FFPC. Enjoy the rest. Get back to your brackets. We'll talk to you next Thursday.